Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast. People who are turning, 18 in this parliament will have had 7 prime ministers in their short lives. I mean, that is just the most extraordinary sense of discombobulating crisis.
Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guest gossip, news and stories from our studio and our team here in GB News Politics in the heart of Westminster. My name is Christopher Hope. I am GB News' political editor. This week is one of the most difficult ones Sir Keir Starmer has faced since he became Prime Minister 18 short months ago. I would say it's his hardest week ever. In a press conference just a few hours ago where I was in Hastings, the PM apologised profusely about appointing Peter Mandelson as his ambassador to Washington. I counted 5 sorries and 3 apologises.
I am sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you.
But how have we got here? And is this the beginning of the end of Sir Keir Starmer, Prime Minister? I'm joined today by a terrific team, our team here at GB News who cover politics, at least 2 of them anyway. The Chief Political Correspondent, Katherine Forster, and our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Welcome to you both. Thank you for being here. It feels like a moment. It's Avengers Assemble. Bring in the top team to explain what on earth is going on. I mean, Katherine, to you first. What's happened here? Where are we with Peter Mandelson? I mean, when he was appointed, it was a surprise, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a surprise. I think let's just go back to the beginning of this. And a lot of this, let's face it, is to do with Donald Trump. Because when Sue Gray was Chief of Staff in Downing Street, before Trump was elected, they were looking at who might be the UK ambassador to the US, obviously a hugely important role. And Karen Pierce was there. She was very popular. She was very happy to continue.
Her and her feather boa.
Well liked, very well liked. And Sue Gray was thinking, well, maybe we stick with her. She'd have been happy to continue. Maybe somebody like David Miliband. Then Donald Trump was elected. And then they have to have a rethink. And at a similar time, Sue Gray was booted out of that job, and along comes Morgan McSweeney as the Prime Minister's new Chief of Staff.
Power struggle, wasn't there? Power struggle.
There was a power struggle, and Morgan won. Let's see how long he stays in number 10 now. Lots of speculation about him. But they thought, we need someone who's going to be good at dealing with Trump. We know he's very changeable. And Peter Mandelson, a Labour giant, the ultimate schmoozer, the Prince of Darkness, incredibly well connected. And so Morgan McSweeney, who was in very frequent contact with Mandelson, was mentored by him, thought that he would be a great pick. And the Prime Minister, from what I understand, wasn't initially too sure. But so it was announced that it was going to happen. You were there, I think, in the February when he started in the role.
Yep,
February. Prime Minister made a big joke.
About a year ago, actually.
A big joke sounded like he was talking about Donald Trump, but said to us it's just Peter.
And called him Peter, crucially, rather than as fast forward to where it was today.
Called him Peter.
Purely Mandelson now, brutal. But Tom Harwood, it was broadly welcomed. Of course, he was a former trade commissioner for the European Union, so used to deal with trade and big areas like that. He was also could deal with powerful people like Donald Trump. He felt about right, didn't he, at the appointment?
It's hard to overestimate how important Peter Mandelson has been to the Labour Party over the last 40 years. I mean, from the mid-1980s, recreating the Labour Party in his own image. The Labour Party used to have a socialist red flag as its party logo. Peter Mandelson changed that to the logo of the red rose. He created the sort of Neil Kinnock project to try and moderate the image of the Labour Party, became the MP for Hartlepool in 1992. When Blair and Brown got in, he was sort of the third man in that Blairist
secret third man.
Secret third man. And of course, he was in the cabinet, not once, but twice in that early time before going off to Brussels and being one of the most senior roles in the European Commission, and then being brought back in by Gordon Brown as Business Secretary and, in effect, Deputy Prime Minister towards the tail end of Gordon Brown's premiership. only to then be a huge leading light in the behind-the-scenes Remain campaign, existing in the Labour world at such high degrees, being the Prince of Darkness, as he was often referred to, or perhaps the Dark Lord, as he became, entering the House of Lords. And then, of course, this appointment that we get to now. Perhaps it's not a surprise that a man that was so entwined with the very heart of the Labour Party world, in particular one faction of the Labour Party world, was the man to go into Washington. A man with an immaculate contact book, a very, very clever man. And perhaps this is where the blind spot came for not just the Prime Minister, but everyone around him too.
And he was trusted by people, Johnson Powell, who was the senior figure advising the PM on foreign affairs. And
another Blair era.
Another Blair era. I mean, actually, Blair is now back, by the way, and we haven't talked much about that, but he's back in Gaza as almost a quasi-official UK representative on the Gaza board. So, it is people being assembled from the old days, and it seemed like a good appointment. But we knew, didn't we, about this connection to Jeffrey Epstein. The FT newspaper had done pictures of him. We knew that Epstein called him PT, rather familiar term for Lord Mandelson.
Well, on the 21st of June, 2023, the FT ran an article that exposed not just that Peter Mandelson knew Epstein, because we all knew that, but the depth of the relationship. The fact that Peter Mandelson stayed at Epstein's fancy house in New York after Epstein was convicted for child sex offences. After Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted paedophile, while Jeffrey Epstein was in prison for that issue, Peter Mandelson stayed at his pad in New York. Now, that was published in the FT. It came about after JP Morgan files were revealed. The Guardian reported it. The Independent reported it. Earlier today, I interviewed Jim Pickard, the deputy political editor of the FT, who wrote that story and indeed asked the then leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, a question on Peter Mandelson and his links to Epstein, at which point Starmer sort of obfuscated, batted it away.
I think I was there. It was a press conference.
It was.
And a speech. And it felt a bit, everyone thought, well, where's that come from? That's obviously, so it was the first question. And yes, he was challenged about it. So it wasn't new to Keir Starmer, was it, this connection?
Exactly. And yet today, what Keir Starmer has tried to do is say, yeah, we knew Peter knew Epstein, but we didn't know the depth of the relationship. I think that's a tricky line for the Prime Minister to hold.
And the detail of that relationship is pretty unpleasant. We're seeing, aren't we, how close they are in these emails released over the past 7 days by the Department of Justice, Katherine.
Well, yes, of course, and it's a huge crisis now, but also it was a crisis back in September when the first tranche of the Epstein files were released. And at that point, the Prime Minister had come back from the summer and talked about the next phase. And then lo and behold, they get embroiled in Angela Rayner's stamp duty. She has to go. Then Peter Mandelson, those cringe-worthy photographs, the birthday card, my
dressing gown.
We love you. Absolutely incredibly embarrassing, making clear how close that relationship had been. And at that point, the government realised he had to go. They booted him out. They'd made a lot of noise about that, ringing him up at 5 a.m. and booting him out. He was kicked out unceremoniously, and that was the end of it. Or was it?
Well, it wasn't.
It was only the beginning.
I think what happened last September when he lost his job was the birthday book, which is Epstein's birthday book, from about 2001, 2002.
Yes.
So what we didn't know then was really the time in office for Mandelson and how that affected with Epstein, and that's why it's been so damaging.
But let's revisit that birthday book for a while. I think it was something like 16 pages of photographs and comments, including one that said "yum yum." And with a picture of the island. I mean, some really questionable stuff in that book,
Yes.
where people were sort of thinking, how on earth did this guy not know what was going on, even though that was before the prosecution of Epstein. That being said, we should return to this 2023 story in the FT. It was in the public domain that Mandelson and Epstein had a close relationship, close enough for Epstein to offer use of his house in New York to Peter Mandelson while he was in prison for child sexual offences.
And that was understood by Sir Keir Starmer. So we fast forward to the fallout, the disownment of Peter Mandelson. What's happened to him is like an old-fashioned, put him in the stocks. He's lost his title, the right to be in a House of Lords, the right honourable, that's gone. That's the third thing. There's a police investigation.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living. And maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of Tally Money, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is Tally Money?
Well, Bev, with Tally Money, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at Tally Money. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
I was at a speech this morning with the PM. He was called Mandelson, just like the PM could barely say his name. I was spitting it out. I mean, he's absolutely furious about this, and the establishment is doing all it can to take away all the garb, all the baubles of office of Peter Mandelson.
Well, the Prime Minister's been on a journey, and just in the last few days, because at the weekend, it was like nothing much to see here. Then it was, actually, we want him out of the House of Lords, but it's all very complicated. Then it was, actually, we're going to legislate to get him out of the House of Lords. And then all hell let loose yesterday when Kemi Badenoch, I mean, she played a blinder, didn't she, really, with that humble address. And then Angela Rayner sort of took control. The whole thing has snowballed. And there we have the Prime Minister this morning. But I have to say, I was sitting waiting for Kemi Badenoch's press conference this morning, which was delayed because we were waiting for the Prime Minister to wrap. I was absolutely astonished at what the Prime Minister was saying this morning, because not only did he row back on the line, the bombshell yesterday, that we thought he'd fessed up to knowing that Mandelson and Epstein had continued to be in touch after Epstein came out of jail. He then said he wanted to clarify that and made out, no, it was just that, I knew that they'd known each other, and he'd accepted, he believed the lies that they barely knew. Come on. Well, as Tom was saying, this was all out there. How is this credible?
Let's just listen to that key exchange between Kemi Badenoch and the question and what the PM said yes to.
Did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
Yes, it did. As a result, various questions were put to him.
So that's Kemi Badenoch there, Tom. Essentially, she said, what did you know in the vetting process? He said, yes, I knew. And now he's trying to wind back, it seems, the day after.
Well, exactly. The following day, Keir Starmer says that he didn't say enough the previous day. I mean, from his own mouth, a shift in position. What Keir Starmer said in the very first response to the very first question in his press conference was that there was more to say. That in the vetting procedure, there were questions asked of Mandelson. And then he said something that I thought was the most interesting quote of the day. I noted it down. I rewatched this several times to get every word. It was because he was trying to say that he was misled. At Prime Minister's questions, he said Peter Mandelson lied to him. The next day, he didn't use the word lie. He used what I would term as incredibly lawyerly speak. So had Mandelson stayed at Epstein's premises, how close was he? The quote from the Prime Minister is, the answers given were intentionally intended to create the impression that Mandelson barely knew Epstein.
Imagine
Now-
with something out of Yes, Prime Minister.
Intentionally
Hampering
intended to create the impression. No longer is there the word lie or the idea that Mandelson said, "No, I never stayed at the house." No, instead, intentionally intended to give the impression. I mean, gobbledygook word salad, but clearly this is a very clever man in the Prime Minister trying to create an impression for himself that
Yes.
he was misled, but without saying the words that he was.
Do you think he couldn't say lie outside the House of Commons? Because that's where it's protected.
I think the documents will reveal, and now the House of Commons has voted to reveal all of the information with regard to the appointment of Peter Mandelson.
And it's a lot of information.
And it's a lot of information. I think that the Prime Minister knows that Mandelson did not deny staying at Jeffrey Epstein's house. So he couldn't say that today. Instead, he had to use this word salad, intentionally intended to create the impression. It's nonsense. And it's the Prime Minister, if I was being mean, trying to mislead the press.
But we already know, don't we? All right, there's going to be loads and loads of information that's going to come out, but we already know that there was basically, in the first sort of supposed due diligence, a 2-page document
They can test 2 pages.
that had including the FT story, including this information, which was in the public domain, that this relationship had continued. And now the Prime Minister is talking, rowing back from that and effectively going, nothing to see here. You were there. Could you actually believe what you were hearing?
It was really tense in that room. And I felt here's a guy fighting for his credibility, not quite his political career yet, but certainly his credibility. He said, sorry, he's a victim-centric Prime Minister. He does adopt the victim position, and that's why he's attacked Prince Andrew, or formerly Prince Andrew, over
I
the way he's
think
behaved.
a lot of our viewers will take issue with that, with the grooming gangs and
correct.
so on. They say that they want to halve violence against women and girls. You've got a very glaring example.
But look at the apology he said there. I'm sorry of what was done to you, the victims of Epstein. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies. Use the word lies there, and appointed him. And sorry that even now you're forced to watch his story unfold in public once again. He is grovelling over this now. So Keir Starmer.
He knows the hole that he's in, and yes, lies in the generality there, but when it comes to the specific questions of whether he stayed at Epstein's house or some of the other particular charges, that's where you got the obfuscatory language.
Understood.
But the difficulty here for the Prime Minister is that his entire political brand, his image, and indeed his career is built upon being Mr. Rules,
Not like the
being
Tories.
Mr. Moral, being the absolute antithesis of the tail end of the last government, being the guy that would be cleaner than clean and whiter than white. And now what you have is him embroiled in this incredibly murky situation where he's dancing on the head of a pin, trying to justify the positions that he has taken, trying to say that he's a sucker who was taken in by something that literally everyone knew.
And he's lost control, Tom, hasn't he, of what's being released. The scale of what's being released in that motion, forced through by the Tories with 120 MPs against over 400 for the Labour Party. Extraordinary how an opposition party can kick the government about. They did that because Sir Keir Starmer lost his backbenchers yesterday. They weren't going to vote with him on what they wanted to do, so they had to amend and amend again what they might release.
It's funny, isn't it, how many parallels there are to the tail end of the Boris Johnson years?
Yeah.
I mean, number one, a scandal over an appointed, in the case of Boris Johnson, an appointed minister who was accused of sexual assault in a private members club, and Boris Johnson stuck by him until he didn't. I mean, that was what ended Boris Johnson's premiership. But there's another parallel as well, which is when Boris Johnson went away to India, there was a motion brought before the House of Commons that originally his government was fighting and eventually acquiesced on, which was to start an investigation, a parliamentary standards investigation into Boris Johnson over the so-called Partygate. Now, this is what actually forced him out as an MP at the end of things. And I don't think anyone quite at the time understood the gravity of what was being voted for then. Have we had a parallel thing this week with Keir Starmer, not knowing quite the gravity of what has been voted for by the House of Commons?
I definitely did, because I was actually not in India. I was in PCH going, why...
Portcullis House.
Portcullis House. It was Thursday afternoon. Why have the whips sent everyone home? And they allowed Harriet Harman to be appointed unchallenged that role of the kind of witch finder in chief, the prosecuting job.
What Boris called the kangaroo court.
Yes, but the whips walked away. I mean, they didn't even the government could have voted against that and brought someone in who they might have thought would be easier. But now they've given control of the whole release of information. Although I'm not sure on that, by the way, I haven't been in the lobby. But we think it's going to be the Cabinet Office releasing all of it, and then the security bits by the Intelligence and Security Committee Parliament. So it might be both doing it, but they're working it out right now.
That was my understanding yesterday, because the amendment to the amendment. But MPs clearly don't trust the Cabinet Office and Number 10 to not withhold
That's the key point,
information. And that was the breakdown of trust. And you talk about losing his backbenchers. Well, I would argue that he's actually lost a lot of his backbenchers a very, very long time ago. I mean, really, over the welfare reforms was the first point at which enough of them clubbed together, because there's so many of them, you can't bribe them with jobs. Enough of them clubbed together and realise if they don't like something, they can just say no, and it doesn't happen. And I remember being in The Hague, it was the NATO summit, when it was becoming clear that it was all falling apart on the welfare reforms. And I asked the Prime Minister then how confident he was of leading them into the next election, because it felt like then his authority was draining away. And I think there is an argument that really, despite this 160 seat majority in theory, the government is pretty ineffectual, because there's so much they'd like to do, and they just can't, because the MPs will.
So at the beginning of a very difficult period for the Prime Minister, aren't we, Tom Harwood?
Well, the term is brittly. Because until Giorgia Meloni, you had about a new prime minister every year in Italy. And it feels like it goes along with a country that is not doing well economically, that can't get control of the business of government, that it's just a perpetual sense of crisis. And that leads governments to become sloppy, to make bad decisions in all sorts of areas, because nothing is going right for them. And whether you look at the migration crisis in this country or the economic flatlining, nothing is going right for this government. And so it's flailing. I mean, if we had a rosy economy, would the Prime Minister be so concerned about having a man in Washington who could do a deal that might save some jobs? I mean, perhaps not. Perhaps he'd be able to take a step back and take a more moralist position on this. But clearly, I think what we have now is a sense of crisis. I mean, people who are turning, 18 in this parliament will have had 7 prime ministers in their short lives. I mean, that is just the most extraordinary sense of discombobulating crisis.
He can get through this. I mean, there will be a release of WhatsApps, emails from people in and around Morgan McSweeney.
Can he get Mandelson? Is this not the beginning of the end of Keir Starmer? Can this man really take the Labour Party into the next election? I think it now becomes an issue of when, not if.
Okay, Katherine, but he did say today he believes he was elected to deliver for the British people. He's now seeing that vote in July 24 as a personal mandate. We heard that repeatedly from Boris Johnson, Theresa May, I think, to a lesser degree, but they do get it into their heads. I can't let all these people down. I think in my mind's eye, he'll think of the JLR workers, whatever he'll say,
Well, yeah, but I mean, he did get that big landslide, and I think we must give him credit for what he did to the Labour Party following Jeremy Corbyn.
Say that was down to me.
And that worst result since 1935. He did detoxify it. He did get it back from the far left. He did make it not scary. But they have come in and they've done a load of things that were not in their manifesto, that they promised not to do, and they are deeply, deeply unpopular. Now, it's not easy for them to get rid of him, but I believe that the only thing that is really going to keep him in indefinitely is the fact that they haven't got anybody better to put in his place. There is no point in getting rid of him unless you've got somebody who's going to give you a bump in the polls. Wes Streeting is very much tied with Peter Mandelson. Angela Rayner's got £40,000 of unpaid stamp duty hanging over her. The only person who would give him a bump in the polls, I mean, he might be a terrible PM, who knows? But the only person who on paper would give him a bump is Andy Burnham, who they have blocked from standing. What good options do they have?
Tom.
And yet on the Streeting point, at least he's a formidable communicator, something that Keir Starmer never had. Starmer became Prime Minister by default by appearing to be some sort of straight-laced guy who'd at least be sort of competent in running the
Jeremy
country.
Corbyn.
And crucially not Jeremy Corbyn, or frankly any Tory. And his whole thing wasn't that he was some sort of grand ideological statesman or someone who could move a room with his words. No, he was supposed to be Mr. Technocrat. And yet, the one issue, competence, I don't think there's a single word that would be associated.
It does feel sleazy that the attacks on the Tories now can't happen anymore. The COVID VIP lane attacks, they can't work because of this. It has neutered so many of the... I mean, it's the moment when they're blaming the Tories for stuff has to end.
Well, it's the whole, they're all the same thing. It just absolutely whacks them now in the face. I think at the general election, they sold the country a vision that, I mean, like him or loathe him, Tony Blair, for his first term in office, stuck to Tory spending limits, did quite a few things that I think Middle England would be comfortable with. I think a lot of people thought that we were getting a sort of new Labour government in 2024. And instead, the first thing this government does is raise taxes by £40 billion. The first
They
thing
found a
this
black
Labour...
hole, Tom. But
I'm sure they'll claim
it.
that. But this is the thing. They campaigned as one thing and governed as another, and it is their undoing.
Listen, I'm due on Martin Daubney's show moments away, so I can't be late for him. He'll go nuts. Just an easy question finally. Is Keir Starmer in place by Christmas?
Christmas, yes. 29, no.
Catherine?
Christmas, yes. 2029, no. We do differ in opinions sometimes, just not on
that one.
this.
And who
Just
replaced
not on
him
this.
if he's not in the next election? Catherine? She's shaking your head.
I can't give you an answer.
Okay.
Andy Burnham, he doesn't have a D's up.
That's definitely a long odds on him. Katherine Forster, Tom Harwood, thank you for joining us today on Chopper's Political Podcast. It's been great. I tweet at Christopher Hope on X. What's your Twitter handle, Catherine?
Forster_K.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom HFH.
There we are. Email me, chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed this show, tell your friends. If you really enjoyed it, leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else to help other people find it. Thank the great team of colleagues behind the podcast at GB News, Mick Booker and Jeff Marsh back at Base Camp, and Rebecca Nunes and George McMillan, the worker bees, busy buzzing away to make this podcast so brilliant. Most of all, importantly of all, thank you again for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and they do catch me during the week with my colleagues popping up on GB News for our latest political reporting and Tom's daily show. Good afternoon, Britain, 12 till 3. Keep up to date with our best reporting, of course, on our website too, gbnews.com. But I'm off to see Martin Daubney. Until next time, cheerio!